So here's the opening passage of this book that I'd like to read. Okay, today's special. The beet is the most intense of vegetables. The radish, admittedly, is more feverish, but the fire of the radish is a cold fire, a fire of discontent, not of passion. Tomatoes are lusty enough, yet there runs through tomatoes an undercurrent of frivolity. Beets are deadly serious. Slavic peoples get their physical characteristics from potatoes, their smouldering inquietude from radishes, their seriousness from beets. The beet is the melancholy vegetable, the one most willing to suffer. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. The beet is the murderer returned to the scene of the crime. The beet is what happens when the cherry finishes with the carrot. The beet is the ancient ancestor of the autumn moon, bearded, buried, all but fossilized. The dark green sails of the grounded moon boat, stitched with veins of primordial plasma, a kite string that once connected the moon to the earth now, and muddy whisker drilling desperately for rubies. The beet was Rasputin's favorite vegetable. You could see it in his eyes. In Europe, there is grown widely a large beet they call the Mangel wurzel. Perhaps it is the Mangel wurzel that we see in Rasputin. Certainly, there is a Mangel wurzel in the music of Wagner, although it is another composer whose name begins with beet, or B-E-E-T. Of course, there are white beets, beets that ooze sugar water instead of blood, but it is the red beet with which we are concerned, the variety that blushes and swells like a hemorrhoid for which there is no cure. Actually, there is one remedy. Commission a potter to make a ceramic arsehole, and when you aren't sitting on it, you can use it as a bowl for borscht. An old Ukrainian proverb warns, a tale that begins with a beet will end with the devil. That is a risk we have to take. That is the opening section of a sort of very precious book to me. I read this first. This is the first novel I ever read as well. And I hope you like that little passage. It changed the way I ate breakfast for like 5 years, because I would eat blended beets for breakfast for like half a decade after I read this, because it's a recurrent theme, the whole beetroot thing. But I won't spoil the book. But I read this in 2015, and it's sort of what spurred on a collection of passions inside me that made me want to do this more seriously, I think. It was really interesting rereading this recently as well. Then I also just wanted to read one other little thing as an introduction to this. And it's actually a piece that I wrote last night. I spent a few hours on this last night. It's for a zine that's going to be published later in the year, that I was asked to write like a 500-word piece on. It's quite odd, I'm not going to lie, but I was asked to write about why I loved Perfume and what it meant to me, and so I wrote this, and no one's ever heard this before, but I hope you guys enjoy it. This is a true story, by the way. So it's called That Ghost You Like Is Coming Back in Style, Beethoven's Left Nostril, Hey I Know You, and a few reasons why I became a scent artist in the age of noselessness. And then there's a little quote that says, a rose is a rogue. So, the Latin root of the word patience is patientem, which basically translates as to suffer. One morning in 1938, a master perfumer named Jean Carl at the apex of his creative existence, woke up in his small townhouse on the outskirts of a tiny town called Grasse, the womb of medieval perfumery. And with sleep boogers still in his eyes, hobbled over to his perfume desk to smell yesterday's samples of a perfume he'd been working on named Magritte, My Claw in English. A master perfumer is like the perfume equivalent of Gandalf the Wizard, for your information. In perfume, we use smelling strips, which are essentially paper wands that we impregnate with the sense of our budding creations, and through this technique, we breathe in our ideas and attempt to understand their secrets across time. As Jean-Carl grabbed the fat end of the smelling strip with his raw, calloused fingers, perfumers develop blisters on their hands from decades of opening and closing amber bottles, and held it up to his nose like some ancient offering rising up into two hairy doors made of wind and flesh. He realized, like a beluga whale realizes, that his sense of smell was gone. A perfumer's most loathed word is anosmia, which is the scientific way of saying your sense of smell has taken the express checkout and left the kids in the chilled meats aisle. The end of all that is fragrant. I think we all know enough about loss and about the sufferings of the damned to grasp what something like this might mean for an artist of this kind. Maybe this story reminds you of someone who, if still alive, would be 250 years old and in need of some serious dental care. Beethoven. Jean-Carl didn't stop. He created for another 3 decades with a colorless abyss where his nose used to be. He finished Magritte and went on to create Mistior in 1947, which is now considered a behemoth of 20th century creative perfumery, and 73 years later it is still in production. He created for half his life without ever really smelling anything he'd made, and went to his grave having only ever shared this information with his son. He also went on to start the first ever school of perfumery, and the Jean-Carl method of perfume is now the bread and butter of any beginning perfumer. I chose this story to try to outline the real nature of scent art and perfume, the earthy heart of an art form as old as the act of sniffing, that results in the gleaming liquid of 1,000 untold stories. 5 minutes after giving birth, a mother can identify her child by smell alone in a room crowded with identical babies. She doesn't believe, she knows. In the same way, the perfumer calls into the receding cul-de-sac of a world made of ancient floral light and knows that if he or she can just shut the fuck up for a minute, this thing called intuition will shake the ice from its eyelashes and say in a voice that we all know but have forgotten, "You are not alone, little one. You are not alone." So that's the little thing I wrote for the thingy, and hope you liked that. I haven't edited it yet, but I often feel like when someone asks me to read or write something for a publication that describes a bit of what I do, I always find that I need to start talking about how perfume relates to storytelling. And it occurred to me yesterday that it would make a lot more sense to tell a story rather than to describe how good perfume is at telling stories. And that's it. Yeah, it's a true story. And if you go on Wikipedia and you type in Jean-Carl, there's like 2 lines on how he created for half his life without ever really smelling anything. Anyway, I've read those 2 bits. I thought that would be a nice way to start. I now wanted to talk a little bit about sort of something that I've been working on for about a year. It's going to be called the Sonic Alchemy Sculpture Series. So at the end of 2016, I started something called the Rothko series. Mark Rothko, if anyone who's watching doesn't know, is quite a famous abstract painter of the mid-20th century. He famously does these massive sort of monolithic rectangles with usually 4 or 5 different sections of colors. They're quite like a pure approach of just like non figurative painting. And I took 3 of his paintings and turned those into interpretive sense. That took me about 2 years to do, and now I've sort of for the last year or so have been working on something called the Sculpture Series, which is going to be 2 or 3 times larger than the Rothko series. It will probably be mostly an installation, and I'm still very much working on how big it's going to be. But before I cancelled the last stream because I wasn't sure it was working, I actually had a whole collection of links to some of the sculptures that I wanted to show you guys. I have one here that I'll show. This is somewhat explicit, but I'm just going to post it here. If you follow the link that I've just posted on the comments, this is one of the sculptures. It's so if anyone needs it, it's down there in the comments. This is a sculpture I found, and there's a little write-up here. It's in a little place called Loveland, which is an erotic themed like fun park, I guess. Sort of like Jamboree, but with phalluses and vaginal things and God knows what. And I found this really beautiful sculpture, which I literally only just found out that it was called Desire today, because I've been looking for. It's quite hard to find. It's in a little island in South Korea, I think, or some part of remote South Korea, and it's a whole theme park full of these sculptures. And I found this really beautiful sort of bronze, I think it's bronze sculpture of this woman. So if you don't know where I'm pointing, the link is in the comments. And I was just sort of trapped by how beautiful some of these sculptures were in this little theme park, and I'd love to go there. And so the perfume that I've been working on for this, so each one of these perfumes in this sculpture series, and there'll be sort of 5 to 10, I think, in this series, is sort of based on what's called like kinesthesia, where I'm taking different ideas of like physical touch and movement, and a lot of the sculptures I've picked are sort of like frozen action. There's a real sense of movement and texture about them, I guess. So the one that I've been working on for this Desire sculpture is going to be called Female Form, and it's more or less going to be about combining pure jasmine oil with like different sort of dirty smells, sweaty smells, and seeing what can go on between combining really light, kind of almost like angelic smells with really dirty, musky, like sexual smells. So that's one of them. And then another one, which if I can just sort of have like a second to find, should be able to just do this. A cool trick if you guys, this has nothing to do with anything, but if you guys ever wanted to try this and can't find an image, you can go onto Google Images and drag and drop an image, any image into your browser, and it will actually take you to wherever that original image was wherever it came from originally. I'm just trying to find this one. If I can just, okay. Won't be a second, guys. Google images. I just thought it would be good to sort of show like a couple of these, and then we can kind of move on from there. This one is actually from Sculptures by the Sea, which is a yearly thing that happens at between, I think, Bronte and Bondi Beach. This one was back in, so I've just linked you guys. It should be there. Lucy Humphrey is the name of the artist. The sculpture is called Horizon. If you guys click on that, it'll take you to her studio page where it says. So I'll just give you guys a sec to do that. So this one is quite cool because it is a massive glass dome, and it is full of, I think, 1.5 liters of fresh water, and then it reflects light and reverses it, so you'll see the sky below and the sea above. This one has been really challenging. I'm working on this one sort of off and on for about a year. I found it quite difficult because you need to use a lot of complex synthetic ingredients to make a perfume smell like glass, to make it smell transparent. So a perfume that features that kind of idea, like this one will, ends up becoming incredibly complex with like 40 to 50 different parts. And it ends up smelling kind of like you've poured a perfume on the ground and then like smashed your boot up against it and like rubbed it against concrete. It's quite difficult to get it so that it smells real and alive, and at the same time like the sculpture I think would smell. So in case anyone didn't know anything what I was just explaining, it's to do with this sculpture at a link I just posted in the comments. Cool. So everyone can check both of those out. Honestly, I'm not quite sure when that'll be done, when the sculpture series will be done. I'm hoping to have at least one of them out by the end of the year, but I will not talk about that today because it's still too early to really get that going. Then feel free to ask any questions about those two guys, and I'll answer those at the end. Then I wanted to talk about two exciting projects that I'm working on at the moment. The first one is going to be called The Last Thylacine. For anyone who doesn't know, thylacine is just the scientific name of the Tasmanian devil, or I recently found out they used to call it the Tasmanian wolf. So I have been working on and off with the National Museum, and unfortunately right before the Corona lockdown we were going to do a presentation where I was going to present this scent that I had been working on called The Last Thylacine. It was actually really quite good that the presentation got cancelled because I got more time to do research and started looking at all these old black and white images of the last ever thylacine, whose name was Benjamin, who died in Hobart Zoo in the 1930s, I think, and got to read about all of these early encounters. And some of them actually involved people describing Tasmanian tigers. I think I may have said Tasmanian devils at the beginning. Tasmanian tigers having a particular faint animal odor and describing the smell of these creatures who have now been extinct for the better part of a century. So I've been working on that. With that one, I've actually been it's been very interesting because I've been working with the material in Perfume. We refer to ingredients as raw materials or just materials in the same way that um, maybe a sculptor would. So when I say materials, I just mean ingredients or smell oils. And for the thylacine scent, I've been trying to combine this ingredient called costus root, which is used in like ancient Indian perfume, which literally smells like wet dogs. It is in the little description they give you when you buy it. It's like um, costus root in brackets wet dog. As you can imagine, that is a potent smell. It smells like really. It kind of smells like if you were to chuck a whole bunch of like hair on a hot plate. Like it's really intense. And weirdly enough, if you dilute it down, like in perfume, we dilute all most of the ingredients we use because it's to do with intensity and changing character. If you dilute the costus root down, it smells exactly like violet flowers. So it goes from wet dog to violet flower, which is quite interesting. And so I've been kind of combining all these dirty, kind of mossy, dark notes with these animalic, what we call animalic, so smelling of different sort of different parts of the body, sort of dirty, musky smells with that. But it's been difficult because when you do those sorts of pieces, like I am with this thylacine project, it becomes really, really filthy, and I don't. I'm more wanting that kind of smell of darkness and of a creature that we can't ever know again, and of a kind of like an olfactory reincarnation for it. And if you go too far on the filthy, dirty aspects of that smell, you immediately lose its appeal and its ability to actually like invoke a reality of some kind. And also, people just switch off. We have like hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary adaptation to recoil at filthy smells, because they usually meant that if you ate them, you would die. And so it's interesting to play around with that, because because there's a line there, there's a real line, and if you go too far across it, you lose any ability to express like an authentic emotion or an authentic picture. But if you get it right, I know some of you guys came to my Dancing and Scent performance a couple of years ago with this primal scent and theme that we did with goodness me, with Maddie Talavelle and Alex. Goodness, I can't remember her last name. Anyway, sorry guys, I can't remember the last names, but that we did with the dancers a couple of years ago. That primal scent plays on that idea of where we take little bits of smells that by themselves are really grotesque, but we kind of manipulate them and shape them into this mystery, into this kind of thing that draws you in. That's sort of what I've been doing with the thylacine idea, and combining these different dark notes and seeing how you get that sort of smell of fur and that smell of I'm sure a lot of you guys get that smell of when you pet a dog with really, really short fur, a short coat, that kind of thing. I've actually been, one of my favorite smells, this is quite odd, one of my favorite smells is the smell of the top of my cat's head. And you get that, because it's very hard to describe, because it's not dirty, it's not clean, it's got that kind of warm, characteristic that is strangely comforting. Anyway, go out and smell a cat's head. That is my tip to you. Um, but ask for its permission first. Got to give it a pat first. Then I'm just going to move straight on to another one that I've been working on, called, at the moment it's just called Stone. I have ideas of maybe calling it Obsidian. Obsidian is like a, Pip, I think you're watching this. Pip is a friend of mine who does geology, and she's an expert in rocks and minerals. And obsidian is like a volcanic rock, I think. It's really beautiful if you guys ever get a chance to look at some. It's beautifully reflective and black. But anyway, I've been working on a project that explores the smell of stone and smells of rocks, and it's been really interesting because when you combine that, I had a bit of a breakthrough the other day with it, where I was combining different what they call globular resins. And so frankincense is a resin that the frankincense trees produce in usually in like the South Arabian Peninsula, Oman and Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and these trees bleed out this beautiful like yellow resin, and when you take that resin and you use it in certain ways, you can actually recreate the smell of stone, which is kind of a mind-blowing thing, because a lot of those resins that are found in trees in the Middle East, they're only really used for sort of like traditional ideas of creating spicy fragrances, or creating masculine scents that are really overpowering, or you usually wouldn't use those materials for their mineral effect, what they call it's minerality, I guess, in scent. It's become this sort of, these sorts of ideas have become possible for the first time ever, where we can recreate the smells of fresh water, the smells of damp moss, the smells of stone, which is not a common thing. But I think also I'm broadcasting from Canberra, and we're going deep into the nosedive of winter now, and it feels like sort of that one of the many languages of winter would be cold stone, I think, and getting that sort of mixture between asphalt and wet cement and dark dirty stones, I guess, has been really interesting. Yeah, I've been it's interesting. When I started working on it, it literally smelled like hot asphalt, hot bitumen, yeah, like new road. And then I had to like pull that back, because that's quite an intense and actually quite unpleasant smell if you're really exposed to it. And then work in all these different sort of watery, cool aspects. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the two announcements that I have. The first one is I have a new perfume that I'm like 90% done with. We're almost done, by the way. We've gone a little bit over time, but it has been lots of fun. And so the new perfume is currently called Paradise Lost, which is like a very significant name of a very significant text by an author called Milton. I'm almost definitely going to change the name later on, partly because I'm a little worried about it going out in the world and being, especially with what's happened over the last few months, with it being unnecessarily sort of disparaging, or anyhow, I'll figure that out. I have a page of names, of 35 names out of my lounge room that has been deeply destroyed by coffee grounds and my cat, that I've just scribbled on, and there's a whole bunch of names. So that one should be coming out. I had this idea that I don't think I'm going to be able to do yet, partly because I don't know when this corona stuff will clear up, but I had this idea of of launching the perfume on the winter solstice, which is the 21st of June, on the top of Mount Ainsley. And so I don't think we'll get it done by then, partly because a perfume has to rest after you finish it for about a month, and I don't have the labels yet, and I need to kind of do that, and there's still a bit to do with finalizing it. That's a commission by a lovely lady named Annie McKendrick, and she's been really great. We've worked together on that one. The scent sort of features two different kinds of jasmine, a brand new material that's very rare in perfume called, that's a natural gardenia essence. Gardenia is not really something that can be normally extracted in the normal ways that perfume ingredients are made. And when you smell it pure, it smells exactly like plums and peaches. And then after a while, this beautiful like texture of the white petals comes through, which is just amazing. So I've used that with a bunch of different beautiful like Sicilian citrus oils. Then sort of some of my favorite work that I've done is involved manipulating a whole bunch of different green smells, so like smells of grass and cut ferns and damp, wet, sort of driving down the Clyde kind of thing. So it's got a real beautiful complexity to it. I sort of over the last month or so have done the bulk of bringing it together and finishing in the scent, and it was one of those ones where you bring the things together and it finally makes sense. So that's going to be coming out in the next couple of months, I think. I've slowed down this year quite a bit with making and delivering finished work because I put so much out last year, and I think it would be good to slow down in that capacity a little bit, I think. And the second announcement is kind of a big one, but I thought it would be good to do it today. I am officially starting the Canberra School of Scent Art and Perfumery, or just the Canberra School of Scent. It's going to be a separate and connected branch of Sonic Alchemy and the work I've done before, but starting in February of this year, I went into my old school, Talupia, and taught 2 classes of 22 students, which was exactly as intense as it sounds, and I loved it. It was fantastic and really inspiring and challenging to be able to express some of these ideas, and so I would like to teach more, and I've been doing a lot more one-on-one workshops this past 6 to 8 months than I ever have, and I'd like to set up a sort of a one-stop shop for people to come and learn and to talk about scent, and to be able to pass these stories on and pass the knowledge on is really important to me. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, the Facebook page will be up for that with some cool graphics, yeah, I think it'd be good to set up the sort of educational part of Sonic Alchemy and the teaching part of Sonic Alchemy, and have its own little wing, I suppose. So those are my two announcements, and I guess that's sort of all I had planned for today. I guess, yeah. Is there any questions? I think Sid, you had a question. Yeah. Sid says, what kinds of ingredients go into a dirty, sweaty smell? That's a very good question, Sid. It's sort of a whole bunch, a lot of unexpected things. If you dilute down cumin essential oil, however you want to say it, and so you dilute it down so that it's at like quite a weak concentration, you start to completely move away from its spicy, like food-like qualities, and you get like the smell of an armpit. I used it in a perfume sort of experiment that I made 3 years ago called Kuso, It's that kind of gross, um, hot, like yeah, hot sweat sort of thing going on. It's very odd. It also really puts you off the taste of cumin, which is unfortunate. But that kind of gives that armpity sort of sweat smell. And then there is, as I said before, costus is a costus root, this extract that smells kind of like a wet dog. Trying to think what other ones. There's a material called oak moss, which if you really sort of stay with it for a while, it has that kind of dark, sort of dirty dirt smell, kind of unclean smell. Um, this is really inappropriate, but there's a material called Oceron. It's a sandalwood synthetic. For some reason, my friend Sylvain once, when we were talking about it, if you just smell from the top of the bottle without putting it on without putting it on one of these scent strips, so you can't really see that, but you just smell from the top of the bottle, it really does smell like unclean genitals. It's it's quite concerning how strong it smells like that. But if you put it on anything else, on a skin on your scent strip, it just smells like sandalwood. So there are a few materials like that. A lot of the musky sort of scents that are in that kind of that's those sensual smells that remind us of ourselves and remind us um, of being intimate. Have that kind of quality. Yeah. So there's another one called tonquitone, which is a synthetic, just off the top of my head, which is used as a reproduction for deer musk, which is like a thing that is no longer used in perfume, but is traditionally, I think it may even still be used in traditional Chinese medicine, but you use this thing called tonquitone, which really, it smells like a very unclean toilet. It's very, very gross and vulgar, but so interesting and weirdly characteristic of what I imagine a male deer would smell like. So those smells. Thank you all so much for coming and being a part of my first ever live stream. I'm gonna do, as I said at the start, I'm gonna do another one same time next week, on Sunday of next week. I'm gonna talk about God, who knows what I'll talk about? Maybe the Rothko series. Talk a little bit more about some of my most well-known work. And thank you again, guys. I hope you had a really nice time, and I'll see you next week. Bye.